I have to tell you the beginning of Don's in my mind. I was cleaning apartment number 2 at my dad's cabin court, and I ran into a to-go bag with about a quarter of a New York steak in it. It was one of those thick steaks about 2 inches tall. And being from a big family like I was, I took it immediately down to the beach and sat on a rock behind Dad's cabin court and ate the whole thing. That was my first steak from Don's. Then I remember in high school on it wasn't a prom date, it was with Chuck, my husband-to-be, where I had a club steak at Don's. I can remember that vividly. But did I ever know I'd ever owned Don's restaurant? It was so out of my sight. So I went to work. I asked Red Russian if I could learn his restaurant, if he'd teach me how to cut meat and show me what he did to run that restaurant. And he agreed to that, and I went in the kitchen with Annie Mayrant was the cook. She worked for me for 42 years, Annie, in the restaurant. But this time she was teaching me, and they made one soup. It was the red clam chowder. But cutting meat and doing their things that they did in that restaurant, and people stood in line to get in that restaurant in those days, I learned the kitchen from Red and from Annie. And he also had me hostessing as time went on, and I also tended bar, so I learned the whole business. I knew a bit about waiting tables and tending bar, but so one day he got in an argument with his son over L&I or some kind of a situation, and he was putting the restaurant into Donnie's name, and Don Russian was going to take it over. And through that argument, I was standing around in Red's kitchen one day, and he sold me the place. He just got to talking about it, and I said I could do this and that, and I could get the down payment. And it was way out of my league, but at the same time, I bought Don's restaurant. June 1st, 1974. Those days, it cost me $110,000, I think. And I gave him a down payment, and I paid him $1,000 a month. And paid for it. The business paid for itself. It was a great thing for my family. My mom loved it. She was in that kitchen, and she was in there fast. And you'd find my mom in the kitchen, and when she couldn't stand, or out at the family table, sitting down and working. And I have a round chopping block that has a hole in the middle from where, and it was probably about an inch thick. So the outside's an inch thick, and the middle of it there's a hole in it. That's how much chopping she did on that block. Here she is with Annie Mayrant rolling finger Delmados in the restaurant. April had troubles on the East Coast. She was married to Dick Nitch, and he got really sick and passed away at a young age. And she called me from Chicago, and she says, Marina, I just am not happy here. I'm in this dark old phone booth, and I'm just not getting along good here. I said, April, come out here. I have so many things to do, so much work to do. And here she comes, and I just threw her right down in that businessman's club. And first of all, and she was a whopper. And then to my right hand in the restaurant for many, many years. This is the beginning of Don's restaurant. And Linda Miller's in. My mom, Frida, and myself, Linda Miller, and my daughter had so much to do with the beginning of Don's restaurant. And this is the beginning. My dishwashers, potato peelers, and myself, my daughters. And my mom, Linda Miller, Frida, and myself on the other picture. Linda brought that picture of me in a toilet seat that said "The Boss" and hung on the wall for 42 years. Linda Miller framed that. And I'm sure everybody remembers that because the boss stayed in that toilet seat for years. I had many people work for me, but I had many long-term people, like Annie Mayrant worked for me for 42 years. Iris Knutson, my bartender, worked for me till she died. And I don't know what year that was, but a long time. And she's also worked with April and Mom all the time as Fina Tandler, sitting there with Mom at one of the parties. We'd do a Christmas party every year for the employees, and we'd get together for different birthdays and occasions. Fina still, if I take her a bunch of parsley right now, she'd clean it for me. She's 89, Fina Tandler. If I bought a place, I'd want her to work for me again now. Here's Annie and an Easter Bunny, I think that's Jessica, and Nancy Buick. What wonderful employees, wonderful friends. Jessica worked for me too, the Easter Bunny, but the two girls in the back are long-term employees and friends of mine. Nancy Buick came up to me in front of the office and she was applying for work. Maxine and I were standing there. And she said, but I'm going to Arizona. I have to go to Arizona in a couple of weeks. My husband's family's there, but I'm coming back in the spring. And Maxine said, well, we need her now, Marina. And I said, but we'll need her in the spring. So I hired her there for the spring. I hired Nancy Buick on the steps. I liked her looks, and I could tell that she would be a good employee. You just have a feeling. And so I hired Nancy there, and she worked for me for years after that. Then, not employees, but we did many, many parties and many food lines out in the lawn area and in the banquet room. And these are some of the ladies. Two of the Greek ladies, Helen and Marina, and the other gals, we had lots of lineups of soap lakers that came and worked our parties that we did. Here's the man that taught me a lot of things in the restaurant business and worked for me. And this is Wally. And he worked at Harrington's, and I went in the back door of Harrington's many times asking him questions about what to do here and what to do there in the restaurant business. Then Annie took off and got married and left me in that kitchen, and I needed to cook, so I got a bottle of bourbon into that bottle of whiskey again, and got Wally in the corner, and he agreed to come to work for me, and he worked for me for quite a few years, till the day he died. And he was a great inspiration and taught me many things about the restaurant business. He was a good chef. Pam Leisman in the front. She has her own business now, the Pita Pit. Pam was a right hand of mine forever. Not only in the club, also in the restaurant, in my life, at the fair. A great gal and a great friend. Worked for me many, many times. There's Pam. It was always fun and laughter and a lot of work. Boy, we had a lot of good people working. Denise Keegan. At the fair working, Denise helped me all the way through my career at the restaurant. She worked the Masquer's Theater for Don's Restaurant. And she's still a good friend and helps with everything. A better picture of Pam. I have to show this one because she loved working and she had a smile on her face when she did. Oh my gosh. Kitty, we miss her. She was a hostess at Don's. Kitty, she's still a friend and keeps in touch with a few of the people. First, when I'd call Ed Norley, I call him so much, he said, first thing he'd say, Marina, just check for me and see if it's plugged in. So I'd do that, and then on we'd go. He was a great, he built the walk-in, vegetable walk-in, and meat walk-in coolers in the 50s for Red Russian that I used all the 40-some years I was in Don's, and they're still there. Here's Mrs. George Notaras, my mom, Joyce Notaras, in the kitchen getting ready for a Greek, for the Greek festival, and with her in this picture is Linda Miller, and April's in the background if you can see her. April, my sister April. Leslie Hovland, who always worked for me but never worked for me, only helped me with different parties, and still, good designer, knows the presentation of food, and is a great friend. Josh Nation's in the back. He worked me for many years, then he'd come and sit in when I needed help when he wasn't working for me. Dawn Amick. When Dawn came to work for me, she was maybe 18 and a tiny little gal. And I said, where in the world do we get Dawn? So what do you think she's going to carry out to those people? You know, she's the head waitress for me for years, works for me for 30-some years, and then she's still at Dawn's restaurant now. She's a great friend. Of course, my daughter Carmen, she had to work for me when she was young, and then she grew into working, running the office. I don't believe that's Frances, but it's Frances. And Frances has worked for me 30 years also, or 18 or 20, something like that, and that's her husband who's passed on. But Frances is probably the best housekeeper in the world, and she may have slowed down a little, but she can do that bed making in 3 minutes, and it looks like it's made right. And she's a great friend. Norma Avery, my banquet room, when she left me, my heart dropped because she was the best banquet room person. She came from Spokane, and she was one of those girls like Nancy. She came down, sat in the office, and was applying for a job, and she said she wanted to be the banquet room manager. I hired her in a second because she looked like a banquet room manager, and she definitely was a good friend too. Carol Gunderson, Uppy for short, never worked for me, but helped me with every party I think we ever had. Not only by working, but by standing beside us and being one of the best helpers. So she worked at the parties, at the Businessman's Club, at Dawn. She helped a lot. Oh, this is at the Trout Lodge 90th anniversary. Linda Miller, God bless her soul, Linda Miller helped me in every way, and she's not here anymore. My daughter Denise is the second person on the picture, and they're preparing food out at Trout Lodge for a dinner we did for them. I don't know Joe's last name, but he tended bar for me down in the Businessman's Club as a young man. He left this world, but he was a great friend and an employee. Thinking of other people that worked for me that I don't have pictures of there. I had a lot of people that I don't remember probably, but I had a lot of employees, and I had a lot of long-term employees. Made my job very easy. The rules I didn't have to have in the old days. Nancy Gibbons, if I didn't mention Nancy Gibbons, was there when I bought the place and was there till she couldn't work anymore. Annie, Iris Knudsen, myself. I just didn't have the cameras or the locks or the keys that you need to keep people out because everybody was working for me. I didn't mention my sister Joycey, Jim Conklin. Jim Conklin's worked with me for 40 years or more. And Joycey, Frida, my sister Frida, she worked for me and a lot of different things. And she's still working at Dawn now, but she did my flowers in the last years, and she's a good hostess. And then, of course, my employee, my sister April, was my right hand for years. My mom, Bev Dunham, sat at the round table there and chopped carrots, parsley, celery, whatever we needed. Dwayne worked for me, Dwayne Nitch, as a bartender at the club, a good one, and in the restaurant as a good waiter, and worked for me a long time. When I first started at the Businessman's Club, all my nephews worked for me. Anthony, Frida's oldest boy, scrubbed that floor, and all the kids that worked for me, Alex and Mary Nichols, both work for me. He's a pharmacist in Ephrata now, and she's head of the nursing home in Soap Lake. And Danny Granello and Christopher Notaras, those boys when they were young, my nephews. They're my nephews. I chased them around town, made them work. They might like it now, but they didn't like it then. They have stories about working for Aunt Marina. So we were, the restaurant and the club and the motel was good for the Notaras family, and whether they were visiting or working or just there. You can't run the fair booth without Kobe. He's been turning that pita bread since he was 7 years old, maybe 12 years old, and he's the guy you want in your restaurant and in your fair booth. And then in the club, one of my earlier girls that worked for me was Margie Smith, and she's still an Ephrata person, and she worked for me for many years. One time a potato truck rolled over in Pasco, and someone told us about it at 2 a.m. in the morning. So we got in a truck and went to Pasco, and we were out there when the sun was coming up, picking up potatoes, throwing them in that truck. So things like that all through my career. We did a lot of scavenging and fun things. But April always said, Marina, you never do things in small ways. You always have to do a great big load of something, from asparagus to scallops to potatoes. So we had a lot of fun doing that. I guess I had the most fun. I'd go get it, they'd have to work it.
How did you keep a restaurant going all those years?
I think by liking it. Number one, I liked what I was doing. When I first got that restaurant, I was there every minute. I liked food and food preparation so much that whatever I fixed, I'd fix it like I was eating it myself, and so it was all good. It had to go out the window looking good, and it had to be out the window tasting good. One man told me I was up front of Don's hostessing, and I I didn't know everything about it when I bought it. I had to learn. But I didn't know I greeted people, and he says, no wonder you're busy. You're here every time I get here, you're here. So I ran my restaurant, how I did it, I was there, and I liked it. And I knew the people, and wanted to please them and wanted to wait on them and be sure they had a good day out. I wrote many letters and intervened in many arguments on things that happen that you don't want to happen, but they happen in your business. A bad meal, too long to get the food. I'm always sending a gift certificate, an apology. People have to want to come and drive to your place, and that was always on my mind. I want them to have a reason to come and drive to Soap Lake, because Soap Lake was not big enough place to support a full-size restaurant like that. And so people did. They came from Pasco, they came from Wenatchee. They talked about Don's all over. And so that was my goal. And how I did it, sometimes I'd be up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd be doing something in the restaurant. Even if it was just on my hands and knees cleaning the corner, I was up and wanting to do something. I'd clean behind, my job was to clean behind the steam table for years. I'd pull it out, I'd scrub it, I'd do the bottom shelf, I'd do behind it, I'd do the floor. And why did I do it and why did I look at it afterwards? Because I wanted to do it and I liked it. And if you're there and you're doing things like that, you're going to be successful.